So hello everyone and welcome to another guide video where I go through how I plan my travel experiences and what I think of them afterwards. This video is hopefully going to be the first in a series of videos where I take a travel experience which has risen up to be the first one in the queue among a load of ideas, and I take you through the process of how I get from it being an idea to something where I can actually step on the plane, train, cruise ship or whatever it involves. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want to briefly cover is how and why. In terms of how, I ask you to give me a bit of space because I'm not using the teleprompter today. I am going from bullet point notes. That's why you might occasionally see a notepad in my hand rather than the small little teleprompter control. This is an experiment to make different types of videos in different ways to speed up the content machine for yourselves. So that gets us over how. Just give me a bit of space with that. As to why, two reasons. One, I've actually had a handful of people, initiate conversations with me about how they're introverts, they would like to travel more, but they just can't seem to get where I am. Now that's interesting because they want to, right? So I'm going to start doing various videos around that, and this series is one of them. The practical, how do I get from A to B? The other reason I'm doing it is I have started putting myself out there a bit in places where introverts congregate online. Since obviously a lot of my channel is themed around how introverts approach things. And you know what you notice? As a bunch, and maybe the positive ones just stay quiet, we can be quite negative. So there's going to be various videos on that, on how I see my introvert existence as being more positive, and I guess this is one of those in that theme. How do I get to do this travel stuff that other people seem to consciously or unconsciously have a challenge with? So that is the how and why. Okay, so as anyone who knows who's been around here for a while, I like structure. So what I did is I had to think about, this is something I just do. How do I actually do it if I was to try and surface it in some way I can communicate? So I figured out I actually do it in a number of phases. And those phases are ideas. This is where a bunch of ideas are just swirling around and eventually one probably moves to prominence. I then move to possibilities, which is where I take that idea and see how it's possible. Now I was going to call that feasibility, but I decided there was things about what happens in that step that makes it more about the possible, and we will come to that in this video because this video is largely going to focus on ideas and possibilities. Other videos will move into the next two phases, which are plans. This is where I actually see if I want to do it in a form that actually can physically exist and be done, and importantly, has a cost associated with it. Because as we know, sometimes some things you decide to do as a travel experience have things about them that are like, whew, that choice is rather costly. So I like to know these things, obviously. And then there is action. Now, what's important about the steps between plan and action is I need to get to the end of plan in order to do things like book PTO and things like that. I am a part-time traveller. Now, I realise a lot of you out there who watch this channel may not be part-time travellers, or at least not restricted by paid time off. My YouTube stats tell me that you're all the same age. Most of you are a similar age to me or older. So a lot of you may actually be retired and not have the paid time off restriction I have, but I do. So I have to get to plan, at the end of plan, so I can go, hey, work, this is what I need off, right? And then I move to action. That is locking down, spending money, booking crap, right? And that obviously extends right through to the final moments because I'm packing and things like that. And this is the other reason why I have phases, right? If you're an introvert who also has some issues around needing to know everything at once, you don't. Phase it out. Right? Put a time horizon on what you need to know, right? In ideas, I just need to know what I might want to do, right? In possibilities, I'm just turning it into whether I like it, whether the shape of it's good, you know, whether it fits together. Do the possibilities excite me? Time horizon. I do not need to know all of the details of every single train, every single time, every single cost, right? Because if you try to know everything at once, you'll just sit in your room and not move forward. So as I said, this video is ideas and possibilities for a travel experience that has risen to the point of prominence. Okay, let's discuss ideas. As you could imagine, these things are, this phase is the loosest, right? Because it is basically stuff that enters my head from, oh, that's interesting, things I'm reading, things I see on YouTube, moments when my mind just wanders in the shower and I go, oh, that's interesting. Or it may just be, I've been browsing around, damn it, that cruise is cheap. So, and things sort of enter my frame of reference there. I would say, without a really long list, I have a number of ideas that have been spinning around in my head that are within the, this might turn into a possibility sort of frame. That is a multi-centre hot. So number one, well, not really in order, but to keep a list straight. Number one is to go to Dubai, spend time there. To go to, I think it's Abu Dhabi. As I said, I've not moved into the planning stage, so I may get some names wrong. Abu Dhabi, because Yas Island is there, which is a whole theme park complex thing, which I'm intrigued by. Then move from there to Singapore, again, because Singapore itself is absolutely glorious. And obviously there is also Sentosa Island there. I've wanted to go back to Singapore since our because I was married at the time, a mistaken attempt to migrate to Australia, and we spent overnight in Singapore and got to see of it a bit. And yeah, I've always wanted to go back. So that's one. Two, go back to Switzerland. I loved my time in the Jungfrau region, and for a while I've thought, you know what, I want to hit all these scenic trains, or how many scenic trains can I hit in one trip without it feeling like train, right? That's something in my head. Number three would be the Dolomites. It's another mountain region, right? I love my mountain regions. Get another one off the list. Intrigued by that. I guess what's been holding me back there is it always felt a bit more complicated than the Swiss Alps, the Jungfrau region or the Canadian Rockies, but I think I have now understood that a bit better, so it's moved closer to being the one that comes to the top. And four is the driving the Iceland Ring Road. Again, been in my head a while. Two things I think sort of keep that from rising to prominence. That is, I don't like to do road trips on my own. You know, the last sort of real road trip we did was Canadian Rockies and Jack was with me, so I'm holding off on that one a bit. And that's why I went on a cruise to Iceland, right? Because it was a good way to sample it. And that actually made me go, I really want to do that ring road, right? So the cruise did what a lot of people say cruising does for them, a sample, which then they follow up with deeper travel. They never do. But, you know, I am at least likely that might happen one day. Now, so what? It's hard really to describe what makes one of the ideas come to the top. You know, it can be numerous things, like the Med cruise I did last year wasn't really in the market for a Med cruise, but I was scanning around NCL's website and it was, damn, that's cheap, right? So then that moved to the possibility phase, and in the possibility phase, it expanded. But that's a point we'll come back to in the possibilities phase. Other things, maybe it just becomes the thing I really want to do, or it's opportunistic, like Havila Voyages I'd wanted to do for a while. I was sort of figuring out a bit as a possibility in my head, because sometimes ideas and possibilities run in parallel, right? They're not necessarily all distinct phases. Possibilities might travel a certain distance while it's still really just an idea. And doing that, I noticed that Havila Voyages was doing really good solo deals at a particular time. Bang, nail it, move forward, right? So some of it is cost and opportunity. I think what's focusing the ideas this year is, as I've said in a previous video, I want to move away from what I call my cruise era, because that was largely driven by not wanting to fly on planes for a bit. And also it made sense to visit some light adventure reasons via cruise ship, right? Seeing some of Norway via cruise is a valid idea. Seeing some of Alaska via a cruise is a valid idea. And so is seeing some of Iceland that way. You know, you might follow it up with deeper travel, but that's a valid way to do it. But I've done all those. And I don't think I'm really in a market for doing lots and lots of what's left, which, unless I travel really far, like New Zealand or things like that, it is largely going to be the equivalent of city breaks or beach holidays on a cruise ship. And I don't think I'm going to be in the market for those. So that means, that's why you see that the ones that are milling around at the minute are more light adventure based. So I guess I should say at this point, what is the one we're going to take forward? What is the one that's currently prominent that I hope is going to get all the way to action? Keep in mind, I don't know where this is going to go, right? Life circumstances come up. Maybe as I look at possibilities, or more specifically plans, and the money starts racking up, you know, we might reverse. And we might find as these videos unfold, I call something and we move back to another idea. That hasn't really happened yet, so I don't think it's going to, but it might. But anyway, the prominent one that we're moving forward to, which I think I really want to action this year, might not be the only thing I do, but it will be one of the things I do, is the Swiss trades. I want to find a way to hit as many Swiss scenic railways as possible while avoiding the tours that do it, which are sort of like train, overnight, train, or even sometimes train, right? I want to find a way to do it like we did the Canadian Rockies, where we have hubs. You know, do a train somewhere, stay somewhere for 3 to 4 days, do a train. That is the one that's risen to prominence, and it has already moved into possibilities. Okay, so the scenic Swiss trains travel experience has moved into possibilities. So what does that look like? Well, I think there's 2 things to possibilities. One, getting the shape of the trip. You know, what does it roughly look like? I won't have locked down a firm itinerary while I'm in the possibilities phase, but, you know, I want to know whether it's just remotely possible. You know, like, for example, during the possibilities phase for Alaska, at one point I was trying to cruise up, move inland and cruise down. But the possibilities phase, before I moved into planning and costs and locking it down, that just wasn't feasible within my PTO restrictions, right? The timings of the cruises just didn't work. So that sort of thing comes up. And also, this is why I call it possibilities, because quite often what happens is that the experience slightly changes shape, right? And that can be for a few reasons. Well, really 3 things tend to show up, right? There tends to be must-dos, things I've got on the list that I don't want to compromise on. Constraints, probably don't know all of them going in, right? And then challenges. So obviously one constraint I usually have is I can usually really only book 14 days of PTO. I think I can book 3 if I get special permission, but you know, I have to follow that restriction. And challenges might come up in the structure, right? Timing of trains, timing of things, or I don't know how to describe it. Things where it just feels like it needs more. Let me give you an example. So the cruise I did, one of the cruises I did last year was a med cruise. It had nice ports. It had some places I really wanted to hit. And I was like, that is damn cheap. But, you know, it was like 9-10 days. And that's fine. But it was falling awkwardly in terms of when I was taking time off work. And I thought, you know, I just want to pad this out. So I just have the full 10 days off work and a 14-day trip. And I thought, I don't really know how to do that. This is challenging. And then I was looking at flights in the possibilities phase, right? What are the flights? Where can I take them from? Where do they land? You know, where do they take off from? And I noticed that one of the places was close to Lake Garda. Then I learned that, okay, that flight's pretty good. So it became Lake Garda and then a train cross to the city where I could embark on the cruise. So that's how I got it to 14 days. That's why I say this is less about feasibility, more about possibilities, because quite often the shape or what's included in the trip changes. Okay, so let's talk about the possibilities with respect to this trip. So I knew the main thing would be figuring out the train route, right? I didn't really want to go back on myself. I didn't really want to cut scenic trains in half. And that was coming up a lot. So I did start prodding ChatGTP with it. And eventually a combination of that and looking at the railway map myself, which I will raise in a second, gave me a route, but the route had a challenge I didn't like. Now, this is why it's called possibilities, right? Because every challenge is a possibility. So here's the route I chose, and then I'll give you the challenge and how it turned into something else. So fly into Geneva, train to Zermatt. Now Zermatt is important because that is one of my main hubs. You know, I want to spend a good 3-4 days there or whatever, doing hikes and seeing everything and experience everything. If anything, that is my sort of Jungfrau bit, you know, where I get to do hikes and everything. And that also means from Zermatt, I can get the Glacier Express to St. Moritz. And this is where a bit of light research helps, right? You do a bit of light research and you learn that actually St. Moritz isn't really like Zermatt. It isn't going to offer me the same light adventure hiking sort of experience that I'm wanting. So therefore, I'm probably just going to stay one full day in St. Moritz and move on. Then I'm going to go from St. Moritz to Tirano, which is, pronunciation is going to be a problem here, folks, the Bernina Express Scenic Trail number 2. Now, if you've got the map in front of you now, you see the problem, right? The Tirano, I then have to either backtrack or I have to get a bus to Lugano. Now the bus to Lugano is still a scenic bus, so it's an opportunity. Where I was like, it's a bus, it's not a train. I'm not sure I like that. So I thought, So I did some digging. It's possible to get from Tirano to Lake Como. Now, Lake Como was what I was thinking of doing, possibilities, right? Before my med cruise. But Lake Garda was easier. And Lake Garda I did want to see. It wasn't a compromise. I loved Lake Garda. But it means Lake Como's still on the list. So, that challenge became an opportunity. So I'm going to go from Tirano on, regional Italian trains or whatever, to Lake Como. That is going to be my second hub. Again, I'm going to spend maybe 3 or 4 full days there. Itinerary's not fully sorted, remember, possibilities. And then I can go from Lake Como back to, Tirano to Lake Como, stay there, Lake Como, then to Lugano. So I've replaced that annoying bus trip with actually a Lake Como hub. And then I'm back at Lugano and I can take the Gotthard Panorama Express scenic train number 3 to Lucerne. I'm going to stay in Lucerne, not sure how long, probably 2 full days at most, maybe 1 full day. I wanted to go there when I was in the Jungfrau region, hop over on the train. But I was enjoying the Jungfrau region so much, I pretty much cancelled in trip any sort of moving away from it and just stuck with the mountain hiking. So I want to go to Lucerne. I'd love to go to Lucerne in the winter, and we'll come back to why this isn't a winter trip, because I seriously considered it. I did seriously consider it, but we'll come back to that. So then I can take from Lucerne, I can get to Interlaken, back in the Jungfrau region. This is by the Voralpen Express, scenic train number 4. Racking them up. So I am in Interlaken then, so since this is possibilities, I'm sort of debating how long I spend there, because there is a few things I would like to do there. I didn't do everything when I was there last time. Like I could do some, boat tours on the lake or on the lakes, which I didn't get to when I was there last time. But I'm also aware that a lot of the lifts and things aren't covered fully by my pass, which we'll get into when I'm planning. So I'm debating how long I spend there, because I've been there, it has costs associated with it, or I can just choose what I do. Then I can go from Interlaken to Montreux via the Golden Pass Express. Boom, five scenic railways. And also, I've got in a circle. I've not backtracked or cut a route in half. The observant of you may have already noticed and already got a comment in. But basically, the Voralpen line is if I went eastward from Lucerne. By going westward from Lucerne, I am no longer on a tourist labelled scenic line, though I'm sure it'll be gorgeous. But the Lucerne to Interlaken bit is not one such line. And then I don't think I'm going to spend a vast amount of time in Montreux. It's probably just the quickest way I can leap onward. And I'm going to go from Montreux to Geneva and then back home. So that is an example of how it works, right? I was looking at the train map, prodding ChatGPT a bit, trying to figure out how I could get a route that was taking me continuously forward, which was really what I wanted. And then I noticed that I had this hop that was trainless, and I thought, well, okay, I can just get the bus. But then, you start looking at alternatives, and that's when I discovered second major hub. Lake Como completes the trip. It's circular. Now, this does raise challenges, though. You may go in with challenges, or challenges may come up. And one challenge it raises is there's a lot of movement, and I don't want to shortchange my hubs. So 14 days seems a bit tight. So I have a feeling this might be one I may have to push that envelope and see if I can get 21 days, which then raises another risk for when I move into planning. I think the cost may add up. We now know that one of my travel experiences for next year will be a trip using scenic Swiss rail routes. I'm hoping to have hubs in places like Zermatt and Lake Como, and the next video will be the planning. In the meantime, if you want to see another trip in Switzerland which went through this process, you can check out my trip to the Jungfrau region of Switzerland right now.